Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-Kun, Episode 5, The Man Who Envisions Love. On to our episode in a nutshell. So the episode begins with Sakura coming over, followed by Nozaki's editor, Ken, who he really likes, but doesn't seem to like him. And Sakura basically asks him, like, why do you like this guy so much? And Nozaki just keeps singing his praises because his last editor, Mino, was so terrible that it makes Ken like a golden shining star. He even says he'd follow him to other magazines if he ever moved to like a different department because he does not want an episode Mino again. He then goes over some of the ways in which Mino is terrible, like not getting back to him for an entire year, always claiming credit for really basic ideas that were things he was going to do anyways. Basically, just all around being a terrible editor, being more concerned about himself and his own life than being an editor, but he also acknowledges that he had it good because Mino's current author, Miyako, has been having to put tanukis into everything that she draws because that's a personal preference of Mino's. We then meet Miyaki, who's or Misaki. What was her name again? Miyako. We then meet Miyako on the street as she's heading home, giving some ink to Nozaki as she had borrowed some before. And basically, he and Sakura then go to her apartment, and she mentions that Mino had just left and that, he had, while he was there, talked about his preference for idols and basically about himself, nothing about the manga, though he did suggest that potentially, in addition to Tanuki, he might also want elephants in her works, but she's having trouble with the elephants because they're too big for the background. And both Sakura and Nozaki think that she should, get mad at him, but she's a very nice person, so she won't. Then Mino arrives, and he says that he forgot something, but it wasn't that important. And he looks around the room before saying that it was the manuscript that he had forgotten. And then he gives Nozaki, well, basically, he accuses Nozaki of being clingy because Nozaki's at Miyako's house, and then he decides to give him pictures that he had asked for ages ago when he was his editor of the amusement park, but all the pictures, instead of showing the backgrounds of the amusement park like he wanted, all show Mino in close-up. Once he leaves, Miyako also points out that they had opened up an editor's blog at the magazine. However, once again, it's all Mino, his outfit for the day, him having lunch, him dropping her manuscript all over the floor, using it as a fan, using it as a tray for his lunch. Basically everything except reading or respecting the manuscript. And essentially, Sakura finally understands why Nozaki likes Ken so much. Then Ken looks at the manuscript and decides that basically Mamiko has been calling for Suzuki many times throughout the manga and tells Nozaki that, he has to let us in on the protagonist's thoughts more. And so Nozaki has the brilliant idea of pretending to be Mamiko for a day to put herself into the mindset of the main character. Though he does make a note that, when he goes back through his previous mangas before the next day, he does note how they're all about love and they don't really spend a lot of time studying. Then he goes to school, tells Sakura that he's playing Mamiko for the day, and gives her a box lunch that he had made because, oops, he made too much, enough for 5 people, or rather 6, because he had 5 others after he gave Sakura one. And she, when she eats it, gets kind of depressed because he's a better cook than she is. Seo, who's sitting next to her, says it looks good, so he gives her one, and she basically complains she doesn't like pink shredded meat on hers. Then he goes over to Mikashiba, who opens it. And at first he thinks it's a little weird that a guy has made a decorated, cutesy lunch for him, but then after he eats it, he thinks that it's really good, and this, of course, brightens Nozaki's day. Then Nozaki is kind of walking around and realizes that Mamiko often has rivals. So he sees Kashima and basically to get the feeling of what it would be like to be rivaling with other girls, takes Kashima on a cart and starts running all through the school with it, with Kashima on it before outwitting the girls, but then he realizes it didn't actually give him much of a thrill and comes to the conclusion that it's because she's not Suzuki, and Mamiko only has eyes for Suzuki, so he basically dumps her off the cart and says, "I'm sorry, I just can't think of you as someone special." And this, of course, is how Hori Senpai finds her later, who basically asks, like, what were you doing with Nozaki on the cart? Because they'd seen him and Sakura had seen them pass by earlier, and she basically says that Nozaki didn't want to hurt his arms, and then Hori lifts her up because she's pretty light, but then she turns it into a competition. Meanwhile, Sakura at the end of the day gives the container for the lunch back to Nozaki and basically says that it was so adorable she made it into her background because she felt guilty for eating it, but she ate the whole thing and it was really delicious, and this, of course, brightens his day. We then have him talking to Ken about the manuscript and basically relating his work while Ken's kind of confused on the other side, like saying, like, what does this even have to do with anything? But but Ken decides that if he's thinking about the protagonist's thoughts, he's grown as an author. Then Nozaki says, "I feel like I need to study more," and hangs up. And then the next manga that we see at the end of the episode, like the post credits, is basically Mamiko talking about how she's been letting her grades slip recently, and she found this workbook with only 30 minutes a day, and then Suzuki complimenting her on being smarter, saying he likes smart girls, and she's like, "My love's leveled up too," and bringing it full circle to a study themed manga, which was funny. Now that we know what happened, it's time to rank the episode, and as always, we will rank on our 2 lists, the mostly objective ranking list, followed by the personal ranking list. So now we come to our mostly objective rank values, and I highlighted those I felt applied to this episode. First off, we have +2 each for our multi-episode supporting character introductions. And this, of course, is Yukari Miyako, who is the fellow manga author who is now under the guidance of Meino, who puts tanukis and everything. Then we have Nozaki's editor, Ken Miyame, followed by his former editor that he really hates, Mitsuya Meino. And that brings us up to 6. We then have what I would consider to be an impactful, memorable moment line, etc., which is the dimension hopping tanuki that appears in Miyako's work, thanks to Meino's influence. Basically, when he's talking about how he didn't have it as bad with Meino as some people, he shows Sakura a manga magazine that's featuring Miyako's work, and as she flips through every single story, no matter whether it's a romance, a fantasy, a historical drama, sci-fi, like it doesn't matter. what kind of episode it is or what kind of story it is, a murder mystery. Every single every single one of her chapters, the tanuki almost overshadows the main characters of her story. And basically, it's called a dimension hopping tanuki, which Nozaki thinks is a little bit creepy. And then when Sakura meets Miyako in person, she literally she's like, I've read your work. It's a tanuki, and there's tanuki, and there's more tanuki, and it's a tanuki, and that's literally all she can remember about her work was this tanuki that was in there, which makes it very memorable because they very, very, very strongly stress that there is a tanuki there, and it is very much present in the mangas. And anyways, with that, once again, I didn't think that there was any. Well, actually, no. I'm going to change my mind live here. There was a negative. No, I'm not going to take points for it, but I do just want to point out that Mino as an editor isn't really doing his job very well, and I genuinely feel if his superiors were aware of his work ethic and his skill level, he would not still be having that job because he does not do well at it, but at the same time, I don't think that's a big enough thing to actually take points for. So it's still going to be a 9 out of 10 episode, but I am calling out that honorably mentioning some negative behavior would be not doing your job properly and not prioritizing your job when you are at work. This then brings our season 1 ranking so far on our mostly objective ranking to in first place, This Love ... is being turned into a shoujo manga. Say hello to the new heroine. Third is The Man Who Envisions Love. Fourth, There Are Times When Men Must Fight. And in fifth, Violence versus the Prince. So for my personal ranking, like I said, I didn't think that there were any major negatives other than Maino's really bad at being bad at his job and still managing to keep it, which is a shock. He even seems to be getting like extra work, like doing the blog, and it's like, why would he be trusted with the blog when he's so bad at his job? Clearly, he's a schmoozer with his boss because otherwise I can't see how he could keep it. But ultimately, I still found the first half of the episode wasn't as funny. It was more about introducing the characters, and some of the scenarios that Nozaki outlines with regards to Mino were amusing, but not like laugh out loud funny. They really weren't. And Miyako seems nice, and the Tanuki thing, but ultimately, like, the first half of the episode was only so-so. However, the second half of the episode, where Nozaki wanted to pretend to be Mamiko in order to get into the mindset of the character, was very good. Especially the scene where he's rolling around Kashima on a cart because he didn't want to hurt his arms, and then outwitting like the female rivals. How we once again find out why Mikoshiba is the heroine's inspiration because he's the one who gave the best response to getting Nozaki's lunchbox. Seo gave the worst with being picky and throwing some of it away. And then Sakura thought it was beautiful, but was also upset that, he's a better cook than her and somehow feels that that lessens her chances to be in a relationship with him because what else can she offer? Which is a little bit sad, but what you gonna do? Either way, it was a very funny second half of the episode, but because the first half was only so-so, and honestly nothing other than the Tanuki really stood out. Well, Tanuki in the cart scene really stood out, though again, it was funny. I decided to give it a 7 out of 10 because it wasn't bad. There was nothing overly wrong with it. It just wasn't a standout. So with that being the case, our season 1 ranking so far in the personal ranking, we have There Are Times When Men Must Fight in first place. Say hello to the new heroine. Third, This Love ... is being turned into a shoujo manga. Fourth is this episode, The Man Who Envisions Love, and then so far in last we have Violence versus the Prince. Alright, so that brings us to our series ranking so far. And on our mostly objective ranking, season 1 is now up to 41 points out of a possible 120, and the personal ranking is up to 40 points out of a possible 120. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-Kun Episode 5, The Man Who Envisions Love. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.